Hi guys, this is Paranormal Sarah with Scary Sundays Archives. Basically, it is a 15-minute short of an original 60-minute segment on liveparanormal.com that I do every Sundays via a live web chat. And basically, I'm covering my most popular topics and show webisodes and condensing them to you so that you can get a little insight into what we do on Scary Sundays. One of the most recent webisodes that I did that was gruesome and fascinating was blood rituals. And it was suggested to me by a good friend, Aaron Sagers of Paranormal Pop Culture, a great paranormal writer within TAP's Para Magazine. He does a lot of events with the Ghost Hunters, and he's a great friend of mine. And on his show on Live Paranormal, which airs right before mine on Sundays, he mentioned that blood rituals was a fascinating topic. So many people associate it with the demonic and therefore with the paranormal if you're ignorant. And so I figured let's go ahead and cover a little bit of blood rituals and what it's exactly about. Because I think the word ritual kind of gets people off kilter a little bit, and people are scared to cover the topic because it's gruesome. But we all have a general interest in blood rituals. We all bleed. We've all seen blood. And if we haven't yet, then we will shortly. It's a part of being human. So, blood rituals. Let's first start with the definition. Any ritual, which is a set of actions done for a symbolic value that involves the intentional release of blood. So think about that. An action done for symbolic value that involves the intentional release of blood. You see it pretty frequently when you start to realize that definition. So what types of blood rituals or popular types are there? Now again, these are just some of the most popular types that you may or may not be aware of and may or may not consider a blood ritual. First, BME, piercings and tattoos. How many out there have a piercing or a tattoo? I do. Alright, this is the most common type of blood ritual, though tattoos and piercings are not always really considered as such because there isn't much bleeding all the time and people really don't consider it to be that ritualistic. However, if you consider the fact that getting a tattoo and a piercing, for most of us who do have it, there's an addiction quality. You are doing it for symbolic value, either consciously or unconsciously. There's a reason why you're getting that piercing or that tattoo or that marking on your body. You're well aware that it's going to bleed, and part of the adrenaline rush that you get through that pain and pleasure principle is associated with a ritual, yes or no. It's kind of a loose term. But it's something I wanted to introduce because so many people have a piercing or a tattoo. Now, piercings have been practiced in a number of indigenous cultures throughout the world, usually as a symbolic rite of passage, a symbolic death, and therefore rebirth. It's an initiation for reasons of magical protection, religious occult, or personal choice. Piercings and tattoos, though in our modern culture, especially in American culture, it's kind of a cosmetic thing. But for most other cultures, especially indigenous ones, there is a lot of bleeding and pain involved, where you're piercing your lips and your ears and your throat, and you're tattooing your body in a long, strenuous, process that can take hours or days, and it is an initiation. So think of piercings and tattoos as a blood ritual and start to kind of encompass how okay that word is. So the next would be smearing or dripping of blood. And you think smearing or dripping, ew. For me, I at first think of like blood smears on a wall of a mass murderer or something. But it's actually due to its importance to life. Blood is associated with a large number of belief systems. One of the most basic is the use of blood as a symbol for family relationships. You always heard the term related by blood or blood brothers. And it means basically to be related by ancestry or a descendants rather than marriage. It bears closely to bloodlines. Blood is thicker than water. And also in blood, Indo-European paganism. But, you figure smearing or dripping, you don't always think about this. But the very common, and even, gosh, I think Practical Magic and, like just movies in Hollywood, you see this all the time where someone slices their hand open and then they do this and they light shines and things change and all this. But they're making this blood connection and this rite of passage. And that can be considered a blood ritual through smearing or dripping. And oftentimes through magical occult still use blood drippings, in stigmata, whenever the Catholic Church goes and sees the Mother Mary crying of blood. It's not necessarily a blood ritual per se, because it's not a person inflicting blood release upon themselves, but it could kind of blurrily fit in there. So the next form of blood ritual is amputation or dismemberment. And amputation or dismemberment, whereas you might think, oh, God, it's actually quite common, especially in a lot of really extreme religious beliefs. Circumcision, self-circumcision, even a lot of African tribes will do woman mutilation of the vagina so that you're removing sexual parts of the body to not be tempted by the devil. Amputation and dismemberment of the body for religious or ritual purposes is pretty common. A lot of doctors see this as far as, even in America, being asked to do circumcisions and altering the human body in certain ways that are both legal and illegal. If you're interested in amputation or dismemberment, definitely check it out. Ask your local doctor. You'll be surprised what they have to tell you. And then for me, one of the things that immediately clicked into my head was BME, Body Modification Enzyme. It's a website you can visit that actually has millions of subscribers and notoriety. And BME does an Olympics every year where people will do amazing, ridiculous things to their body to dismember, to amputate, to change, to alter. And it is considered a blood ritual because part of it is that blood addiction, that fascination, and that pleasure-pain principle. Definitely check it out if you have a curiosity, but I warn you, it's hard to look at, so it's very graphic. The next form of blood ritual would be blood consumption, which, whether it's literal or symbolic, again, ritual means of symbolic value. So you could say blood consumption is part of that Catholic rite of, the blood and body of Christ, but again, you see it in a lot of occult type of religions where they're drinking blood for spells or power, or again for that blood ancestry to be one with a person. It's pretty common. And also blood consumption, it smears into another webisode that I did, but cannibalism for serial killers. Blood consumption or body consumption is very popular because it's a mental thing for that killer to take in a part of their victim and keep it with them and make it a part of them forever. It can be definitely a part of the MO for a criminal to engage in cannibalism, which again could be considered a blood ritual of sorts. And then lastly, the most common, whenever people say blood ritual, probably the most common thing that comes to mind is sacrifices, whether it be animal or human, which then is just inflicting the death upon someone as a sacrifice, or something as a sacrifice to your God. Happens quite frequently in the Mayan cultures and a lot of Native American cultures, and you can still find it today in world cultures around the globe. So let's kind of talk really quickly, because we're ticking on time here, about the historical reference of blood rituals. Well, in the Bible, the blood of Christ, obviously. In 1800 literature, quote, blood serves to illustrate the point that the same substance can stain or cleanse, contaminate or purify, drive men to fury and murder, or appease their anger and restore them to life. Gentiles would drink blood of sacrifices, believing they could obtain some spiritual attributes from the substance. Killing of an innocent baby and drinking the blood was thought to be a way to principalize innocence and be a fountain of youth. Paul the Apostle writes, "And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission." Now the Gentiles knew and believed this, but they did not have the reality of what blood represents on a spiritual and psychological level. And again, with the Mayans, sacrificing and bloodletting both was a hierarchy of dedication to the tribe and also to their gods. It was also a sociological status within the tribe of how important and willing you were to do things to your body to show your dedication. Now in the voodoo, they use it as protection, sacrificing of a chicken and other numerous rituals that they'll do for protection. Now the question is why? Why, right? That's what Scary Sundays is about. And for blood rituals, it's symbolic. The blood, at least in most cultures or religions, It's symbolic of life, of death, rebirth, life in its most primitive form, and it's tangible. Not everyone can see or feel the spirit, but you can see and feel blood. And we all have it running through our veins, and whenever that stops or ceases, or if we let out all of our blood, we die. So it's symbolic of life. It's believed in a ritualistic effect that it adds the intensity of an action to be completed, or a prayer, or a ritual, or a spell. Uh-oh, he's up. Now in vampirism, they'll talk about the blood as being symbolic. In a lot of vampirism cultures, they don't always drink blood per se, but it's an energy connection with another person. It's very symbolic. They're not draining the blood of somebody, but tasting and acquiring that life source. Now in psychology, which was something that a lot of people brought up in the webisode when we did this on Scary Sundays, was how psychology incorporates blood rituals. Historically, blood rituals were used to cure a lot of mental illnesses. In the early 1900s, by the very famous Benjamin Rush, he did a lot of bloodletting, and he did a lot of blood transfusions. If someone was experiencing mental illness, it was thought to be a demon or an evil entity within the body, and the only way to get it out was to slit the wrist and let it bleed out until the person nearly was close to death. Then either suture and mend the wounds and let them restore their blood supply, or do a transfusion with an innocent animal such as a lamb, which of course most people died. Now, another way in psychology that blood ritual is brought up is, of course, in body mutilation and cutters. You see in a lot of young women, but it's not discriminatory for sex or age. Body mutilation is a way to physically see your pain. When people are really struggling through depression, or when people are feeling a lot of emotions that they don't want to feel, and they're bottling them up, and they don't have an outlet for which is healthy to them, or a use of therapy that they can talk it out, people will prefer to cut themselves and to feel that pain and to get that release. It's something that they can see, something that they can control, something that they can, they can see the scab, they can physically see the healing, and it becomes a projection of a problem that they're having within their body, and to make it a physical outward problem. It's a release and replace, so to speak. And body mutilation and cutters, it varies from case to case. It's very individualized, but for the most part, you see it quite frequently. So, that, in a nutshell, is blood rituals, because we're coming close to our 15 minutes. But if you liked what you heard, if you liked what you saw, and you learned even an ounce of knowledge, please feel free to join us every Sunday on Scary Sundays. It's at liveparanormal.com, and we actually use Ustream, YouTube, Blog Talk Radio, and Afraid TV, and thousands of people can chat online, debate, give their opinions, give their experiences, share their education and knowledge. And within 60 minutes, we hope to open your mind a little bit to some parapsychology topics and PSI research. We cover everything from spontaneous human combustion to blood rituals. So absolutely feel free to join us every Sunday at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time for Scary Sundays with Paranormal Sarah. And until then, guys, I hope that you enjoyed the show. Feel free to send any of your questions or possible topic ideas to paranormalsarah@gmail.com, and you can also find me on your favorite social stalking sites such as Facebook or Twitter or MySpace. Just when in doubt, type in Paranormal Sarah. So until then, guys, I will talk to you soon, and I hope you enjoyed Blood Rituals on Scary Sundays Archives.
Like a child with flowers in her, with blood and into the sun.